Hi there, Ischa here, and welcome to The Higher Life, where I explore concepts considered esoteric, spiritual, new age, and psychological, and I unpack how you can apply the wisdom of these concepts to really empower your life. And in today's episode, I want to talk about one of the core drivers of the human experience, the seeking of personal happiness, or how to be happy, especially in the current conditions that we are in as a species. There's lots of war, there's an environmental impending disaster. You may be thinking, how is it really possible to feel happy in my personal life when there is so much misery around the world? And it's a great question, because through the work I've been doing over the last 20 years, I've come to believe that the pursuit of personal happiness is something that every single human being is hardwired for. So even if you aren't making a conscious effort to become happiness in the world, there is a part of you that will be seeking it through everything that you're doing. You just may not be conscious of it. So we have this kind of core driver, this patterning, this urge, this aspiration to become happier species, a happier human being. And we have all these strategies that we've developed as a species, as humanity, to try and achieve this goal. And some of them have worked out, and some of them have been very disappointing. And it's left, I think, many of us in a kind of confusion as to, is happiness a genuine goal? And why is it that when people have a certain level of affluence or material comfort or fame or recognition or all these things that we believe that will make us happy, they don't seem to be as happy as one would imagine you would be if you were super successful or super rich? And in this episode, I want to dig deep into this, because I think that there is an answer that we haven't really considered to that question of, how can I truly be happy in the world? I think that actually happiness, in this sense, it has phases of maturity or cycles of maturity. So when we are a young human being, a young person, maybe a young ego, the idea of happiness, or that pursuit of happiness, it's really geared towards making it out in the world in one way or another. That's that sense of creating a certain material comfort or affluence, or it's very immature, the version of happiness that we pursue. But then, of course, it's totally appropriate when you're a new human being. You're not going to be seeking out higher or mature levels of happiness that maybe you would see an older person gravitate towards, simply because you haven't had enough life experience. So in fact, we're hardwired as human beings to pursue happiness, to use our creative energy to create an internal experience of happiness. But we begin as young, immature people or humans, where creating happiness in our external world is where we put our focus. And of course, as we start to grow and mature and have more experiences out in the world, our sense of what happiness is also starts to transform, evolve, and mature or expand. And this is, of course, if you're following a natural maturation process without interference or trauma. And I'm going to get to that, because, of course, most of us have experienced some kind of trauma or dysfunction in our lives, which has created a kind of distorted pursuit of happiness, or we don't really understand what it is to become happy in our lives, to be happiness. We still think that happiness is something that we can need to get or create or generate through our material world. But as we get older, we start to understand that there's a ceiling to the type of happiness that kind of pursuit can bring us. It satisfies you for a while, especially as a younger person. It's exciting, it's interesting. I equate it a bit to like going into the workforce when you're really young and you get your first job and you're just so excited to get money and to be out in the workforce. You don't really care if you're working for McDonald's it's not as important that you have status in your job when it's your very first job, because you're so you're so new to the workplace, and it's actually quite exciting and fun. But of course, after a few years of being in the workforce, that initial limerence period, let's call it, that what was giving you happiness in that beginning phase has worn off, and you're seeking something potentially more meaningful, or you're wanting to grow, or you're wanting to have more opportunity. So that happiness, it's not present anymore, and it kind of gives you a catalyst or an urge to then seek out a new version of happiness. And I guess if we were mapping it out, you would see that seeking process gets ignited usually in a new cycle of life. We have a natural tendency then to maybe want to go into a relationship or have a family, or to mature and evolve. And what made us happy as an 18-year-old or as a 25-year-old or even as a 32-year-old starts to significantly shift again in middle age. So it's not that we were wrong in pursuing the types of happiness, pursuing those sources of happiness when we were younger. They were simply age appropriate, and we tend to grow out of it. But what we don't grow out of is that hard wiring that really is a programming, like a computer programming, that is seeking new experiences of happiness. And let's define what that happiness is, because I really think that it gets misconstrued with other versions of emotion, such as excitement, exuberance, joy. Happiness is a real sense of equanimity and opportunity in one single experience. So there's a sense of being almost at peace with yourself in the experience, or there's a kind of contentment that is made available just at that time. And through that, you're able to really access the opportunity of the experience that you're having. I really think those two concepts, equanimity and opportunity, really fuse together, and we find ourselves in this really unique state called happiness, where our inner world and our outer world sort of come together and are in perfect harmony for a while. And how that happens constantly transforms as our inner world transforms to meet the transformations in our outer world, and vice versa. Simply as we age and mature as a single human being in our personal life, so too will our notions of happiness. But that primary seeking to continually find those new states, those more evolved states of happiness, is something that we all share as a species. And it's easy to see if you look out in the world and know that the outer world often reflects our inner world. There has been so much material and resources and discussions and retreats that are focused purely on helping to educate humanity on what it is to be happy. And it is so important at the moment, because in a single life there is a point where every single human being comes to realize that the most mature and evolved state of happiness is when you as a single human being, an energy being, actually become happiness as a state of being. So it's no longer something that you're seeking outside yourself. It's no longer something you're seeking to create through the creative or artistic process. It's no longer something that you are facilitating through relationship and connection and intimacy. You've exhausted all those versions of happiness, and you've become completely enriched and transformed through that journey, through different levels of happiness. And finally you reach this stage where you come to understand as an elder, as a master, as a fully matured human being, that is actually an energy state that you can become as a single human being. In a more religious context, they may call it grace. And that's when you're no longer affected by the conditions of your life. You simply become very attuned and at peace with the magnificence of being alive. You really are happiness. And that is not to be mistaken with positivity. This idea that you should generate a positive attitude. You should forcibly create this happy self to go out in the world and make everyone else happier. They are what are called forced states of happiness. The kind of happiness that I'm referring to, that kind of perfect elder state, where you've just lived enough life, you've had enough of those different versions of happiness that you're fully contented. It doesn't matter what's going on in the world outside you. You keep bringing this beautiful state of inner bliss into your life as you wake up every day. And everybody is affected by this. Because if you can imagine that every human being actually naturally matured into this elder state of simple contentment and bliss, imagine how much bliss the whole human system would be experiencing. The difficulty that we're facing at the moment is that we don't really understand this singular pursuit of humanity for happiness very well. And in fact, many human beings get stuck in what is called a dysfunctional ego pursuit of happiness. And that is where they're acting out a childlike version of happiness, but as an adult or as a mature person. So they're still wanting to get things to be happy. They still want other people to recognize who they are and what they're bringing into the world to be happy. You know, they really have this transactional experience. So we see it as a very immature ego, you know, who is out there in the world still trying to get power, still trying to have a sense of significance. And of course, when we're young, that's a natural way. The happiness brings us into this kind of outer journey, but it has an end point. And if we don't transform and mature out of that naturally into, as an adult or mature age, we become old people behaving like children and teenagers still trying to get happiness in these really dysfunctional, immature ways. Now, it's dysfunctional because it's an immature pursuit of happiness in a mature being or a matured being. So this is something I think that we don't really fully understand. We kind of discount immature versions of happiness, almost demonize them, because we think as we grow out of them that we must have done something wrong, or because they're no longer fulfilling us. But actually, that moment where something that was working for you no longer works for you, it's not because it didn't work or there's something wrong with it. It is very much about reaching a ceiling and knowing that there is a trigger point now to actually mature into a new journey in which happiness shifts and changes to match the level of maturation that you're moving into. So this is the really core part of the work of empowerment. When you realize that you have a singular purpose in your life right now, and that is to become happiness, then you start to explore your life in a very different way, because you're really talking about a state of being that you're bringing into your everyday life. And you start to let go of some of those old and outdated and dysfunctional ways of pursuing happiness, because you recognize that you've outgrown them. And that there is an invitation now to come into a subtler, a more mature way of becoming that happiness. It's a kind of service to society that happens very naturally when you start focusing on this evolution or this maturation process that you're in, rather than happiness as something that you have to achieve as an outcome. You realize that when you focus on personal empowerment, you recognize where you are in this life journey. You may be at an earlier phase, you may be middle-aged like me, or in a elder phase. So you start to recognize, oh, my personal power right now, that must match actually the level of maturation that I'm in, the life cycle that I'm in. And it's normal that maybe what made me happy before no longer makes me happy now. And this whole idea of what makes me, the me that you are referring to, this is the key here. Because when you're young, the me is me, the I, the ego. Like children, it's all about me. They're looking to get, receive, and they're very joyful, but they're very needy. When what makes me happy, when you are self-aware and you're empowered and you mature into an adult, it's no longer that egoic me, that I need all of this to be happy, you know, or I need to give away everything to be happy. Your sense of me has shifted, and now it's I'm in a new phase of life. I'm in a new experience, and what happiness is has shifted with me. And now I can focus on maturing as a human being, and therefore naturally I will become happier as a human being. And if you really focus on that self-awareness, that self-empowerment, what will actually happen is when you reach an elder stage, you'll naturally become happiness. It's a natural outcome of personal transformation, of walking the path of personal empowerment. So if this is something that resonates with you, if you're curious about what this looks like in a very pragmatic, practical sense, absolutely visit Higher Life Academy. I've set up some courses that walk you through the path of personal transformation so that you can become a truly empowered human being and reach your final goal of becoming happiness as a single human being, raising the overall happiness of the whole system of humanity, which is only going to be a positive contribution to the whole universe. We really just want to be happy, but we do need the education to understand how personal power is the source of our happiness, and to really focus on becoming empowered beings rather than focusing on consumption and materialism and recognition and fame. That's all immature versions of happiness, and as a species we're really moving into a kind of middle age elder phase where we need to grow out of those old, outdated notions of happiness so that we can actually take care of our environment and take the pressure off using precious resources and energy to create material items to supposedly make us happy. And we all know that we've really reached a ceiling. It doesn't do the job anymore. So we need to let those behaviors go. And it really starts with owning that pure goal of, my goal in life is to become happiness. And this means walking the path of personal transformation and supporting my own maturation process as a soul, not just physically. So definitely check out our courses, The Empowered Way, at higherlifeacademy.com. So until next time, take care and love life.